Hey, Dave Melinda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. I'm honored to introduce a guy that we're going to unpack some fun stuff today. And we're going to go in directions where we don't normally go. So that hopefully piques your interest. Today I have Maxwell Ivy with me. How are you, Maxwell?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Dave?
I'm good. I know you said your friends call you Max, so now I'm officially going to call you Max through the rest of the day, but you're technically Maxwell. So, and you actually are the blind blogger. So tell us, what does that mean?
Well, it means that once upon a time, I was the only person on LinkedIn and Facebook that people knew who was blind and a blogger. And as a means of shorthand, they started calling me that. And when I finally decided that I was ready to be an inspirational self-help type person and needed a website, they encouraged me to go with the blind blogger. And it was one of those decisions where I had other ideas that weren't as good. And thankfully, I just said, thank you, that's a great idea, and ran with it. So it really is just a reminder that even now, I do a lot of interviews where people still don't know another blogger, podcaster, author who happens to be blind.
Okay. Wow. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I will unpack that in a little bit. I think of how limiting that must be, but yet you've worked through so many of those limitations. So, I mean, we're going to unpack a lot of that today. And I just want to say thank you for hanging out with us on the show today. And I'm excited to learn from you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it. And it's funny you mentioned the idea of the blind blogger being limiting because when I started, it was really more than I thought I was capable of. I didn't think I was anything special. I was just a guy showing up, working hard every day to build a business online and help support my family. And other people, explained to me that I did have this great story to share. So in the beginning, it was a big name to take on. But here lately, it is doesn't really cover everything that I'm doing. It doesn't encompass being an author, a public speaker, a publicist, a coach, somebody who likes to travel around solo and experience the country. So it has become a little limiting, but it's one of those things. It's such a great brand name. I just can't bring myself to start over again.
Sure. Awesome. So tell us real quick about your book. So you're an author. So you've written one book, multiple books. What's on the horizon there?
I've written 4 books so far. The first one, the one that has been the bread and butter for me, is Leading You Out of the Darkness into the Light, a Blind Man's Inspirational Guide to Success. I've also written a book about my experiences going through gastric surgery and losing weight called It's Not the Cookie, It's the Bag. And
well, there you go. Oh yeah. My gosh, that's awesome.
It's a great title. It's just a shame the book doesn't sell more, but it's a great title. And the artwork on it is awesome, or so I'm told.
Sure.
And then I have 2 books in a 3-part travel series where the first one is The Blind Blogger's New York City Adventures, how you can make your dreams come true. The second one is The Blind Blogger's First Speaking and Signing Adventures, how you can conquer your fears. And we don't have a title for the third and final book of that series yet, but it will continue my growth as a speaker, an author, and also even many of the things that I had to learn more than once before they finally sunk in, and I finally started making a business out of the public speaking side of what I'm doing, as well as being more business-minded towards my writing.
So do you have a topic that you like to write about, or do you just tend to write about what's currently going on, or what's your focus typically?
My focus typically is to write about either things that are going on now, things that have happened recently, or things that have happened in the distant past where I believe that there's a lesson to be learned in there, either for me or for a potential reader or listener. And also, if I have friends who have gone through things where I learned stuff from them, I have some close friends now who warned their friends, you have to be careful what you say around Max or you might end up in his next book.
Uh-oh. Well, we are taping this, Max, so just be careful
Yeah,
of names and faces because that comes back to haunt you, right?
it can. It can.
That's awesome.
It's good that yeah, it's always safer when those stories are positive.
Yeah, no kidding.
When
Yep.
the you know
Yeah, totally. That's awesome. Well, I want to jump all the way back because this is a personal thing that I want to learn about because in prepping to get to know you more, I found out and you shared that you were part of a carnival family, and oh my gosh, that's like every kid's dream. I don't know if like that, maybe that's just me, but like that just seems like that's every kid's dream to be in the carnival, travel with them. So what did that look like for you as a kid growing up?
well, it changed over the years. When I was early growing up, say let's say younger than 10 years old, carnivals didn't travel year round. They only
Okay.
worked about 8 or 9 months out of the year, and then in the wintertime they would be home. So in my family and a lot of other families I know, the kids would stay with relatives, sometimes very distant relatives, from the beginning of the school year to the end of the school year,
Okay.
and then they would join up with the family's carnival during those summer months. And that's the way it was for me most of the years when I was growing up. And another thing that was kind of different for me as opposed to the other kids is at this during those years, I have retinitis pigmentosa, so I was also starting to lose some of my vision. And from an early age, my parents and grandparents kind of figured out, if we don't want to worry about where Max is, the best way to do that is to put Max to work. So, so at 5 years old, I was putting syrup on the snow cones and putting the butter on the boxes of popcorn.
Oh,
You
that's
know,
awesome.
yeah,
And
yeah, they
so you
got me
remember
started
back,
in.
you remember that?
Oh yeah, oh heck yeah. I I remember the fun of being the one who got to do that and the responsibility. I also remember the drudgery of having to be the one who had to go and clean all those syrup filled things out at the end of each week.
Oh,
And it
sure.
seemed like you always got stung by a bee or overrun by ants,
Yeah.
because back then it wasn't disposable. Back then, those things, you mixed them yourself, you put them in glass jars, and you had to clean those things. And it was because my grandmother, she was, German. She was from the old school. She believed that if you were complaining, that meant you had time to do work.
Whoops. So
And,
then your
and that
work
could,
list got longer, huh?
yeah, and that could be scrubbing dirty canvas, wrapping nasty old chain, tearing up used tickets. It just would depend on what she needed done.
Wow.
But yeah, they felt like if I was on the midway, if I was on the midway while we were open, there was always a chance that somebody could take offense to a slight bump and a problem because I worked in the cotton candy wagon when I was young. As I got older, I worked in the games. I did help set up and take down rides. And at one point in my life, there's been grease on every inch of my body because some of them rides, that's the only way they go together.
Sure.
The only thing I never did in our business is I never drove. That's the only thing that I can, I've never done, and for obvious reasons. But yeah,
Yeah.
it was kind of fun. During the season, when we were with the family, you'd be in a different town, so a lot of times there were new parks, there were new kids to play with. There would be like historic things that you would go visit while you were there in town. And a lot of times they didn't go to the same list of towns every summer every year. So
Okay.
so each year, there'd be some towns you look forward to going back to. I always used to look forward to us going to Taylor, Texas for the 4th of July because Taylor, Texas had a miniature golf course.
Okay.
And so whenever you weren't working that week, you knew you could play putt-putt. That was one of those you look forward to every year, And, July, August in Texas, it's so hot. People didn't want to come out and ride the rides till dark anyway. So
Okay.
you had some time to play with.
Sure. So did you, I totally want to know as a kid, after everything closed, at night, did you guys get to ride the rides after everybody left, or how'd that work?
No, we did not get to ride the rides after everybody left. But we could ride the rides when they were open, as long as there was no line on the ride.
Okay.
So, and the Carney kids, they were known to the ride operators by sight. There was one weird one that none of us kids really cared for, was when the bumper cars started to become a regular thing on the smaller and mid-sized midways.
Okay.
They wouldn't let us Carney kids ride the bumper car. We had to have actual tickets for it.
Huh.
And that was because, a bumper car took 2, sometimes 3 trailers and a lot of time and effort to set up and take down. So it was like, we worked too hard to get this thing here. We're not going to let y'all ride for free.
So what was your favorite ride, Max, growing up?
Tilt-a-whirl, bumper cars, scrambler.
Wow.
I liked rides that didn't go upside down, or that didn't go upside down, because like the kamikaze and stuff like that, you get but I just didn't like the feeling of being, just totally out of control.
Sure. Yeah, no, it makes sense. Wow. I could talk about that carnival thing all day. So thank you for that little glimpse in there of being a kid again. And, that's just so cool. And I hope that we can get back to carnivals really quick and get past this pandemic stuff. So fast forward into, like, how did you, what inspired you to start writing and blogging, and where did that come from, do you think, Max?
It came from, 1, not really knowing what I was going to do next, and 2, having some good friends who made suggestions and challenged me. When my dad died in 2003, we kept the carnival going for a few years, but by 2006, I personally was out of the business and needed to know what I was going to do next. So first, I started helping other people sell rides, and that involved doing it online as the internet was coming along.
Okay.
So I had to figure out a whole bunch of things in order to sell rides. In the beginning, I had to learn how to hand code HTML, because as a blind person, that was my only option in order to get a website online. I wasn't able to use the what you see is what you get, or the drag and drop options that were available. So in addition to learning how to code HTML, I had to recruit clients and set fees, and later on build an email list and come up with a lead magnet, and eventually use social media. And so I'm doing all these things visually impaired, with not a lot of money, with no skills or education in the area of computers or websites.
Sure.
And people started noticing me. They're like, Max, the fact that you take on these difficult challenges with joy, that you don't make excuses, you just keep doing what you're doing, is very inspiring. And we think you ought to share more of those experiences of being an entrepreneur who happens to be blind. And 2 years later, I finally agreed with them, and I said, okay, I'm ready to be an inspiration. I started the blindblogger.net, and there I share my experiences of continuing to help people sell amusement equipment, traveling, speaking, and quite often my blog posts start out with something that went horribly wrong and what happened after that. It's hey, I find that there are ideas for blog posts and podcast episodes all around us. If you're just willing to do, you got to keep your mind open, but you also have to be willing to embarrass or humble yourself.
Sure.
So I put a lot of stuff out there that people call authentic or honest, but really it just comes down to knowing that sharing these things that maybe don't make me look so great in the beginning, but teach a lesson and I come out pretty good by the end, are the best way I know of to teach other people how I've managed to get from point A all the way down to point J or K or L or wherever I'm at now. Mm-hmm. So after I started the second blog, somebody said, Max, I think you should write a book. And so I wrote my first book. Then I had the opportunity to compete a writing prize through Amtrak and on a trip to New York City. So my next book was about that experience. Eventually, started doing podcast interviews to promote myself because I didn't have an easy way to get and meet people face to face.
Sure.
I thought there had to be a way that I could get myself out there more. And, going all the way back to 2013, I started doing interviews on radio and podcasts and appearing on virtual summits so that I could tell my story and direct people to my website and find some new friends and potentially some new clients or some new customers. So that's a lot of this has happened either because I felt the need to do that next thing, or people said, Max, you should do this, or better yet, people said, Max, there ain't no way you can do this. And, we all know how that ends. I like to say the best thing that can happen to you is to have a good friend double dog dare you to do something that scares you.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, we talked about that in a recent podcast. It's about a double dog dare. I mean, when you get to that level, Max, that's like, those are fighting words. So that's so cool.
Yeah.
So on your website, you talked about finding your passion, following your dream, so help people, kind of understand if they're listening, because we have people that are listening that, they're in corporate America. They're trying to get out of it because they see that there's something different for them. How do you find your passion? How did you find your passion, Max?
Well, I found where I'm at now by starting with things that were familiar to me that I could kind of build on, because I realized I was no longer going to be part of the carnival business as an operator. What could I do beyond that? And since I couldn't book events or promote events, I could sell equipment. So I find a lot of people, they have these ideas, and so in some cases they've had these ideas for years, maybe even for decades.
Yeah.
But they've been working this corporate job because that's what they have to do in order to support the family, or in order to continue to have satisfaction for themselves or from their families. I mean, as well as I do, a lot of people go into careers and stay in them because of the opinions and approval of people in their lives. And
sure.
So, leaving those professions comes with a whole lot of baggage. So I would say the most important thing to do is there something that's been in the back of your mind, but it scared you? Or it's something that you feel like you have the germ of an idea, but you're not sure where to go with it next or how to make it be successful. And so those are the cases where you have to start finding someone that or someone that you're acquainted with, to the point where you can start to have a conversation and see who you can find in your community that can help you flesh out the germ of the idea or the spark of the dream into something bigger. And I'm a big believer in building your community and also in asking for help and accepting help from others when it's offered. And I think that one of the problems with people is they feel like if they share them with other people, one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to get laughed at or they're going to get stolen. And those are really some of the things that hold us back. I mean, we aren't meant to do the big things all by ourselves. The really big, important goals, they not only require help, but they're more fun, successful, and happen a lot quicker if we allow people to come along and be part of the journey. So I would say for these people working in corporate, they probably not only have the idea, they probably have the names of 2 or 3 people that they are thinking, if in a perfect world, I'd go to this person for help getting started with my new company.
Sure.
Well, the thing is, it's not a perfect world. It's never going to be. But so why don't you go to that person and go, hey, you're the expert in this field. I know that you've been doing this a long time, and I would really like to have your opinion, your suggestions, your advice, and even maybe ask them for their help developing the idea into a more formal plan. That's the way I do it.
Sure.
I know it's not easy. I know it's very uncomfortable for people to ask for information, much less ask for help or opportunities. So I like to share this expression with people in this particular area. And that is, when you refuse to ask, you rob the other person of the joy they would have received from helping you.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I know it's still counterintuitive, especially in the business world. But the truth is, I wouldn't be where I'm at now without a lot of people that have been part of my story. And really, think about how good you feel when you get the opportunity to do something or to answer a question for somebody else. And then
Yeah.
try to remember that feeling, keep that in your mind, and think about that other person and go, you know, by me not asking for their help, I'm actually making their day harder.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. And
So
I know,
that's what I would say. That's what I would say. You have the idea, act upon the idea, reach out to somebody to help you act upon the idea. Continue to build a community of people who can encourage and support you and challenge you. And as I always say in these interviews, if you don't have at least one of those kinds of people in your circle already, well, then you can head over to my website and say hello.
well, there you go. Max will help you out. And I think I remember before I wrote my first book, Max, you know, somebody asked me, or somebody told me that if you don't have at least 5 people in your phone number, access to their phone numbers that have written a book before, you probably will never write your own book. And it was like,
wow.
you know, so I'm like thinking about that. I look on my phone, I'm like, I have nobody that has ever written a book before. So I went ahead, my quest was to find friends, create friendships if I had to.
There
and
you go.
Yep, I finally found 5 people. And then, you know, a year later, my book was, you know, in Amazon and a #1 bestseller in that in some categories. So that building your community thing, like you said, Max, is so important. Where did you start? I mean, for somebody that's like, okay, I have a good idea, I think, but I don't know where to start building that community. Do you have any tips for them, Max, on where to go next?
Right. Well, building a community is a lot easier now than it was in 2007 before Wi-Fi, WordPress, or Facebook. It's a lot easier now. I mean,
yeah,
back then, all you really had were forums. And to be quite honest with you, some of those forum moderators were buttholes. I mean, people that had sincere questions would be laughed at or shamed for not having better questions.
Wow.
Yes, and that is from my own personal experience in forums for people trying to design websites.
Sure.
So, but you know, now we have Facebook if you use it properly. We have a lot of the social media options that everybody else knows about. But the real thing that I think people they overlook is just the personable, honest, direct outreach to somebody. And what I like to do, especially if the person has a social media profile, and I think there's somebody that I would like to be connected with, I'd like to get help from. First, I start by helping them by either promoting their post, you know, reading their content, leaving comments on their podcast if they have one. I like to help them. I like to introduce them to people I know because, you know, just because accomplished doesn't mean there are areas where I don't need more help in. For example, one of these days I want to talk to you about some ideas you might have on my next book being a bestseller.
Sure.
In a other than our disabilities. So we don't know it all yet. So we need to reach out. So I would say help the other person. And then after you've done some nice stuff for them, like introducing them to people that can help them or promoting their work, then send them an email. But make it an honest, sincere email. Don't go with the, you know, 3-4 line stuff that all the experts say you should go with because short emails get better responses. No, you know, send them, I mean, you don't want to go overboard with your text, but use a subject line that lets them know a little bit of what you're doing or why you're reaching out. And also be honest with them. You know, make them understand that this is a sincere request from somebody that is struggling, that needs help, and that is ready to take advantage of whatever advice or suggestions this person will give back to you. And so that's, you know, so that's where and then of course, the most important part of this whole process is gratitude. And I don't mean just sending them an email saying thank you or giving them a phone call. What I mean is the most important show of gratitude is, do you apply their advice? If somebody responds to your email or your message or answers your call and talks to you, and they say, these are the things I would do if it were me, and you do none of them, that's ingratitude, in my opinion.
Sure.
That's the worst form. That's the worst form of ingratitude I can think of, because that's, and I actually got that from a real estate guy about 10 years ago. He said, Mr. Ivy, when people offer to help you or they answer your questions, you better be prepared to do one of two things. And I said, Mr. White, what should I be prepared to do? He said, you better be prepared to write a big check or to work your butt off.
That's awesome.
So find the person, target that person, help them do something they need to do if possible, reach out, ask them directly, and then show proper gratitude.
That's great. And I want to go back to, what you said about helping them first. I think it's so important. I get inundated on LinkedIn for people that, are looking for things. And it's just interesting when you find somebody that really wants to help, not necessarily so that they can get something out of it, but just, finding somebody to actually help them first, like you said. So if you're out looking for somebody and you say, hey, how can I help you before how can you help me? I love that. I love that, Max. I think that's so cool. And it's it is, whether it's a human nature, whether it's a guy thing, it's hard to ask for help, right? So, with your challenge of not being able to see, does that kind of make it easier for you to ask for help?
Yeah, because I was raised with this whole attitude of, Max, with the fact that you're losing your vision, you're going to need more help. So you need to start off asking for help. Never be afraid to ask for help, because people are going to want to help you and you're going to need it. So yeah, I have an entire lifetime of being raised with a whole different attitude towards asking for help. So yeah, it is hard. It's one of the topics that I get asked to speak about or to talk about on podcasts more than any other topic that I am considered an expert on. And beyond that, if you want to talk about really hard, it's bad enough when you ask for help. But what's really funny is if you see people where somebody comes along and offers to help them without them thinking they overtly asked for the help, because then it's really ego driven. It's really like, who the heck do they think they are? If they think I need their help, they need to check themselves, because I am obviously doing just fine. They need to go help somebody who needs their help,
Yep.
That's the gut. You're laughing at me because I'm right. That's the gut.
Absolutely.
So what I like to remind people of is a couple of things. One is it took them just as much courage to offer to help you as it would take you to ask somebody else. So try to remember that when people offer to help you, you may be correct. You may not need their help at this time. They may be mistaken. But just remember, it took courage. It took a lot of guts, to use an old-fashioned word, for them to reach out to you. But the other more important thing is, we ask in so many ways that have nothing to do with the written or spoken word. People pray, they meditate, they use affirmations. A lot of talk about the law of attraction and vision boards, where you think about it enough and opportunities to start to come along. We underestimate the ability of other people to see our hidden meanings in our social media posts and comments. I mean, there's been more than one time where I didn't think I was advertising for help, and somebody was reading my comments on a blog or visiting my website, and they could tell just by looking or reading that I needed assistance with a particular issue, and they reached out and offered. So we sometimes, it's leaking through out into the world, whether we're doing it on purpose or not. And of course, there are people out there who are naturally more intuitive, that are professional listeners, people that really pay attention, especially if they have a connection to you. But there are people just randomly in the world who are intuitive, are more sensitive to your thoughts, and they may see something you write and you're like, I just read that again. It doesn't say anything about me needing their help. Well, I'm sorry. When they read it, that's what they heard, and they were probably right.
Sure.
So don't discount the nonverbal. Lots of stuff's been written about body language because that's easier to diagnose.
Yeah.
But we do it in our social media posts. We do it in our emails that we send to people. We do it in our text messages.
Wow,
I've,
that's
I've
cool.
had I've had people respond to me in a text message, and I thought I was sending them emojis that communicated one message, and they were like, "No, Max, this is what I thought." So even something as simple as the stickers and emojis you use, if you may be thinking they're saying one thing, and somebody else may be getting a totally different message, but they are probably right. That you don't forget that we ask in a lot of ways that are nonverbal. And when those people do reach out to you, they are showing a lot of courage.
Sure. That's so true. So I want to turn the corner a little bit because you blog and you're doing these things. What got you interested in the coaching piece where you actually kind of come alongside and help people? Where did that, was that just a natural progression for you, or how did that come about?
I don't think it was a natural progression. There are people in my community that I trust, known for years, who thought it was part of my natural progression. Now, the interesting thing about the coaching is when I first started doing coaching, I thought people would want me to help them start to go after their goals and dreams, or help get them unstuck if they were already going. And I do that. I've been very happy to help a few people along the way. But what has turned out is that people didn't really want me to do that for them. They're happy getting that by osmosis, let's say, by following what I'm doing and being inspired by that. What they really have wanted me to do over the years is to either teach them how to become a guest and be on podcasts, how to get more exposure for their brands or for their passions even. Some of them are not trying to make money at it. They just happen to have a particular hobby or fascination or nonprofit even. So, sure. And, people started saying, Max, how do you do it? Then it was like, can you teach me to do it? And then it was like, well, Max, can you do it for me? So
can you do it for me? There you go.
Yeah. So something I started doing in self-defense, in 2013, I started, putting myself out there online because it was the only way I could do it for me.
Sure.
Has turned into be something that other people want me to do. And it really, if you think about it, it really shouldn't be a surprise. I grew up in a carnival family. I've done a whole lot of promotion over the years. So a carny kid helping people get exposure, that's almost like a natural combination if you think about it. So yeah. I got to the point of, okay, Max, would you rather do what you want to do and what your friends think you should do? Or would you rather do what people want and need you to do and will pay you to do? Sure. And I decided to go with the latter. I like to pay my bills, and I like to be able to eat in a nice restaurant every once in a while, or travel to another city when COVID's over. So
that's awesome.
So what I do now is I teach people how to be great podcast guests. I coach them on answering the questions they can expect to be asked based on their story and their niche and the shows they're going to be on. But most importantly, I teach them about the power of their story and how to tell that story more effectively, because there were several years where I didn't realize the power of my story. I thought that I was nothing special, but eventually somebody explained to me, actually my good friend Adrian Smith, who I like to call my blogging mama, and who I plan to mention at the Oscars, Emmys, Academy Awards, Grammys, if I ever win any of those puppies.
What do you mean if? It's when, right?
Yeah, there you go. Thank you you for the reminder. My one of my clients, Adriana, is going to get mad at me since I said if. That's going to cost me a few bucks in the swear jar there, man.
See, Adrian,
when I win one of those puppies,
yeah,
it's going to cost me some bucks in the swear jar because if is a bad word with her.
There you
it's
go.
A bad word with me most of the time. So when I win one of those, I'm going to mention her in my acceptance. But she's like, Max, you have this built-in excuse you're not using. And there are so many people in the world who don't have a built-in excuse, but still aren't really doing anything with their lives. They're sleepwalking through their days. And while they're uncomfortable, they're not uncomfortable enough to risk things being worse if they try that goal or dream of theirs. So,
sure.
So understanding that it took me 2 years and a lot of arguments to get to where I understood the power of my story, I feel like that's the most important thing I do is to help my clients, if they don't realize that they have this great story, because one of the things I've noticed is a lot of the really cool people in this world, they don't realize how awesome they are.
Sure.
So I have to help them see it. And then I have to help them get to the point where they can actually say those things about themselves. That's a hard thing to do. So those are some of the things I work with people. And then, once I get them ready, I do the bookings, the social media promotion, the email list advertisement for their interviews or for their other online exposure.
Okay.
So I started out wanting to be a coach to help people accomplish their goals, and that didn't work. So now I'm a coach to help people promote their passions or their businesses. And I think and I like sharing that, because I think a lot of people feel like if the first effort they have at some new venture doesn't work the way they thought it was going to work, that it's a failure. And in many cases, the idea wasn't a failure. It just may be that there's one part of it that needs to be changed. And then you try again, and it's maybe not a failure, but maybe not a success, but not a failure either, Right. And I feel like that's the most important thing I can do, is to honestly show people that I am not perfect. I don't have it all together yet, but I work on it every day. And just because it didn't work this day, this week, doesn't mean you're a failure. Doesn't mean I'm a failure,
That's awesome. Well, and I think about growing up, and I wanted to be in the major leagues, and I wanted to be a pitcher. But if I would have been a first baseman in the major leagues, I would have still been a success, right? So whatever type of coach you are, you're still a success. Whatever you do in life is, provided that I believe that if you're doing it with following your passion, you're going to be successful in it. So I have a question, because you were talking about telling your story more effectively. And as we start to come in for a landing here today, I want to kind of unpack that a little bit. What tips would you have for somebody that, they might have had the experiences in their life, but they kind of struggle on, sharing that effectively. So what tips would you have for somebody like that?
All right. Definitely love that question. I just wanted to finish one thing on your thought about the baseball analogy.
For sure.
If you had been a third base coach or a manager or a scout or some other aspect of professional baseball, even an announcer or somebody who wrote about the industry, you would still consider yourself a success. And that's one of the things I would really like to work with people on, is deciding for themselves what success looks like. And so I think we did a good job there.
Absolutely.
As far as telling your story, I think it comes back to your community, because in a lot of cases, you need to find that one person who will call you out and go, no, none of this aw shucks BS, none of this false modesty. You did what? And why aren't you telling people about it? Because there are lots of people that, like you said, have had the experiences. In some cases, they just feel wrong about bragging about the experiences, whereas they should be thinking that there are others who can benefit from hearing how they have overcome and made it through these experiences. I have a friend and a client named Lorraine Regularly, who's also the editor of my books at wordingwell.com. I mentioned her because without her, my books would have taken so much longer to get published. Because I would have had to do all the work by myself, and as a blind guy doing publishing, that's not fun. So she used to worry about sharing about the fact that she had been raped, that she had been in drug use and prostitution. And I finally convinced her that's not the part of her story people are going to focus on. They're going to focus on the successful editor, author, proofreader, ghostwriter, and recently an artist who's actually selling her work even in the pandemic.
Nice.
And once I convinced her that people were not going to think poorly of her, they were actually going to be impressed and inspired by her because she made it through, then it freed her up to start doing it. She trusted me once, and I was right once. And it basically has not only allowed her to get some healing in her personal life that she wasn't getting before then, but it's allowed her to expand her business and put her business in front of people that it wouldn't have been in front of otherwise, because they came to listen to the story about overcoming the tragedy, the crisis, and they stayed to hear about how she became an author, how she became an editor. So a lot of times it's either the fear of bragging or the fear of looking bad.
Sure.
And as long as you continue to go through the process, continue your journey, even if you don't see yourself as successful as you would like to, or if maybe some of the people in your community don't even see you as successful yet, as long as you made it through and you're continuing to make it through, there are going to be people who will be inspired, motivated, or entertained by you. And as a result of hearing that story, they will stay around to listen to your nonprofit, your church group, your band, your film project, your crazy invention that you've been working on for 12 years in your garage. So if you've had the experiences, tell people about them. Tell them how you managed to get through them. Let them become a fan of you. Let them see the person rather than the potential brand. Let them fall in love with you as you have been, as you are now. And that's how you build a loyal audience that you can then use as you grow yourself. You can use it to sell stuff, or you can use it to have people volunteer for an organization. You know, whatever your goal is, it can all be helped by you sharing that story. And some of that stuff is going to be painful. Some of that stuff is going to be embarrassing. So you know what you do? You don't share it all first time out. You know, you share a little bit of the story the first time you're interviewed.
Yeah.
You know, and the more you do it, the more comfortable you're going to get, the better the hosts and print interviewers are going to get at asking you the right questions and being persistent in getting the answers that may, you know, so it is a process, but I have 100+% faith that by sharing my story, I have built a brand that, you know, as the blind blogger, as Mr. No Excuses, as the host of What's Your Excuse show, I've built a brand by sharing my story as honestly as I can at the moment that I was in that particular experience or interview. And I hope more people will do that. Take a look back at what you've gone through, because I guarantee you, you have had more experiences than you can remember. And in fact, that's one of the things I like to get people to start with, is to make a list. Things that you've accomplished, things that you survived and overcome. Make a list. Put it down on paper in front of you, because I guarantee you, you won't remember a third of what you've been through or what you've accomplished. I mean, I have done, I don't know how many interviews where when I tell a host that I had to learn how to code HTML, they're like, wait, stop. That's a big deal. We don't need to go on to the next thing yet. And there are lots of people that are listening to me and you right now who the same thing would be true if they sat down and just made a list of everything that they've overcome, accomplished. Right. Yep. And that's one of those gratitude exercises where the more you think about it, the more you look for it, the more you're going to find.
Wow, that's so cool. And, you know, in business, unfortunately, Max, we've gotten to this light speed where we can't slow down enough to list things that we have, you know, gone through. We're unable to stop and be grateful for anything. So what a great message to kind of slow down and, you know, take inventory of where you've been. Hopefully it'll then, you know, help you on where you're going to be going. So that's great stuff. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, I'm glad you appreciate it. I talk a lot, but I'm not always sure that I'm actually saying things that help other people. So,
well, I'm writing stuff down. So,
all right, you know, well, good.
As long as I'm writing stuff down, I don't care about anybody else. So, you know.
Oh, and I love that. I love that. There's a great line in Man in the Moon. Andy Kaufman played by I forget the actor now. But the life story of Andy Kaufman, and he had so much trouble in the early days getting work because he was doing comedy that made Andy Kaufman laugh. And he eventually, you know, there's a point in the movie where the bartender or the club promoter says, the whole point of comedy is to sell booze. And he starts to, you know, that's when he comes up with the lip syncing gimmicks where he pretends to be Elvis and Mighty Mouse and stuff. So,
okay.
But I love what you said. As long as I'm writing down stuff, then you're doing great. That means so much to me, because what that's saying is, as long as I'm having an aha moment, this is a great podcast episode, no matter what happens after I post it to my website. Absolutely. That's one of those things. I can't tell you how proud I am of you for saying that, because it's so hard to do.
Yeah.
It is so hard to get to that point where you're like, I'm doing this for me. I enjoy doing it. Yeah, I'll take some input from my audience.
Right.
But I'm not going to do this just to get clicks. I'm not going to do this just to get downloads. I'm doing this to make me happy and then go from there. And I mean, I'm serious. You should be so proud of what you just said there, even if you didn't really think about what you were saying at the time. I mean, that's just amazing.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. I tell you what, Max, you went right to the front of my list when I saw this carnival thing, because you know, it just brought me back to being a kid, and I'm so tired of not being able to be a kid. Just because I'm in my 50s doesn't mean that, you know, it just kind of eliminates that ability, right, for us to be that. So I so appreciate, you know, just reliving that little bit of time. So so awesome. Yeah. A couple more questions for you. I'm going to let you go. I want to know what Max Ivy's tip of the week is for this week. What are you thinking right now for an entrepreneur listening? What's a good tip of the week for them?
A single good tip of the week. I always go back to the one that has gotten me here, which is, if you don't ask, they can't say yes.
Great. That's awesome. My gosh, that's like so simple.
I've asked for a lot of things in life, especially in the last 13 years, that I had no right to, but they said yes anyway. So, but what that goes back to is, back in the day when I was doing the bookings for our traveling carnival, we had 7 or 8 rides. Everybody else had 2 or 3 times as many rides as we did, and most of their stuff was newer, flashier, and scarier. So
sure,
the only way we got bookings was to just keep calling people until we found people that didn't have a carnival, or that had one even worse than ours, or smaller than ours, let's say. And I would get tired of making those calls and getting told no every possible way it can be said to a human being.
Sure.
And when I would complain, my dad would just go, "Look, Max, if you don't ask, they can't say yes. Now stop complaining and call the next number."
Well, between your dad and your grandma, that must have been brutal, huh?
Well, like, you know, when you're in a family that operates a business, that, you know, you don't get a lot of, I'm sorry you feel that way, and you should really take some time to think about how you feel and try to work through it. No, we have to get open on Thursday. Now, on Friday, we can talk about this, but between now and Thursday, we just got to get open. And, you know, of course, the other part of that, if you don't ask, they can't say yes, is most people have either said or heard it said, what the worst thing that can happen is they would say no. But I grew up around positive people, and so my dad always said it the other way.
That's so cool. Great. Thank you. Thanks, Max, for sharing that. So one last question for you, and this is kind of a unique one. What's one thing that most people listening wouldn't know about you that you feel comfortable sharing?
You know, this is a really hard question, because, as you know, I'm a very open, authentic, honest person.
Sure.
I've really had people tell me, you know, Max, I know your brand is authenticity, but could you be a little less authentic? So I'm not exactly sure what I can tell people that they don't already know or have the ability to know about me. But, you know, I'll mention a few things. They may not know that I'm one of the few visually impaired Eagle Scouts in the world.
Oh, wow.
I had my Court of Honor for my Eagle on August 22nd, 1984, here in Houston, Texas. And it was one of the few times that the Houston Chronicle and Houston Post both covered an Eagle Scout ceremony, because there's so many of those ceremonies every year.
Sure.
They had always had a policy against it. So, you know, if you look in the Dallas Morning News or the Houston Chronicle archives, you can see the pictures from my Court of Honor, which is cool. I once threw out the first pitch at the Astros game back when they were still in the dome.
Oh, that's cool.
And I wasn't really as big a baseball fan as I thought I was at the time. So I assumed that it was 90 feet from first to second and second to third, that it was 90 feet from the pitching mound to the home plate. And of course it isn't. It's 62 and a half feet. Well, I practiced for 2 weeks at 90 feet. And so on the day of the game, I go out there and you know, they don't want you on the mound, because pitchers are very superstitious and very protective of their pitching. So they have me standing in front of the mound, and I wind up and I throw one, and I throw it into the mesh behind home plate. I mean, over the backstop into the netting.
There you go. Good job.
And they kept trying to get me to throw the ball lower, and they said, "Just come on, just throw it lower. You're throwing it plenty harder," and they couldn't do it. So finally, they broke the rules, and they said, "You know, Max, the pitcher's mound is on an angle, so we think if you stand on the mound and throw it, you'll be naturally throwing it downhill."
Yeah.
And it worked. It worked. I threw a perfect strike to the catcher. My only regrets are there was nobody famous in the battery that day, and nobody has any pictures or film of me doing it. So those are a couple of things people may not know about.
Then you're going to have to do it again, Max, just to get some pictures.
Yeah, but there's a big, to me, there's Minute Maid Park is just not the same as the Dome. You know, it's
sure.
You know, it's just one of them things. Growing up in Houston, it would never be the same. So maybe you know, I should visit Chicago, because then I could throw out a first pitch and sing Take Me Out to the Ball Game in the 7th inning.
There you go. Yeah.
Any Cubs fans that can hook me up, I'm available. You know?
Good luck. Yeah, any Cubs fans. Well, I'm from Milwaukee, so we're not a huge. We're not really. We don't really like Cubs fans. So
I'm sorry.
No offense. Sorry. That's all right. It's all good. So
yeah, but those are a couple of things that people might not really know about me. But you know, there really isn't much that isn't out there in the world. And you know, one of these days somebody's going to go, "Hey, Max, I was searching on the internet and I found these pictures for you." So
nice. That's cool. Well, hey, Max, thank you so much for hanging out. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, learn more about the Blind Blogger, what you're up to, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Sure. They can go to theblindblogger.net, or they can just send an email to justask@theblindblogger.net. They can say The Blind Blogger or What's Your Excuse on any of the Alexa or Google devices or apps. And my favorite social media is over on Twitter, where I'm Maxwell Ivy. And I'm going to give you a link later. I'm hoping some of your listeners will come join us in the What's Your Excuse Facebook community, where we are a very encouraging, supportive group to help our fellow solutions finders accomplish their individual goals.
Awesome. Yes, we will definitely put that in the show notes, linking to that group. And I love What's Your Excuse. I mean, talk about smacking somebody right in the face with, you know, that's fantastic. So holy cow, this time went so fast, Max. I appreciate it. Like I said, I got a bunch of notes. So thank you for opening up your life to us. And, you know, I have to say that, you know, I could see how easy it would be for you to just use your, you know, blindness as a reason not to do something. I really appreciate the fact that you know, have worked through a lot of that stuff and are able to, you know, help so many people. So thank you on their behalf. Thank you on my behalf, and look forward to learning more about you in the coming days and weeks ahead.
All right. Well, you're definitely welcome. And one thing I like to make sure I express to every host is this: I know how much time, effort, and money you put into having a great show, the research that you do so you can ask great questions. And really, there wouldn't be The Blind Blogger or the What's Your Excuse thing without podcast and radio hosts like yourself. So thank you so much. Really, without you and lots of people like you, there wouldn't be The Blind Blogger.
Sure. Awesome. Well, I can tell you, no question, that I had way more fun than I used to have, that I'm usually used to having. So I appreciate everything. You know, so it's awesome. And again, now when I see a carnival, I can think of Maxwell Ivy and know that he probably had his hand somewhere on this piece of equipment. So until I get to see that in live in person, I'll just keep thinking it in my head. So thank you so much for the investment, Max, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. I look forward to it.